I never want anyone to feel ashamed of their journey, because the fertility journey is not always straightforward. It's not always a straight road. That was all I needed. I needed someone to say, I've been through this. I know what you're going through. I felt like this. That was it.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
Over the last couple of months, we've had a number of very deep conversations with a range of people looking at some really important issues. As you know, I mean, the podcast is based on cultural taboos, things that we don't really talk about. So one of the areas that we really wanted to raise awareness is fertility. We've spoken a few times about baby loss and miscarriage previously, but we wanted to look a bit more as to the journey prior to that and what people go through. So in this week's episode, we've got Sarina with us, who is the CEO, I'm going to call her the CEO, of Himmat Collective, which is an organisation that helps raise awareness about fertility, miscarriage and baby loss within the Punjabi and the South Asian community. Sarina, could you give me a bit of an introduction about yourself, really?
Of course. So, hello everyone. I'm Sarina. I'm 29. I run Himmat Collective. Myself and my husband both run that together. And it's an organisation where we provide a safe space for people to talk about their experience through baby loss, miscarriage, the fertility journey. We support each other going through the fertility journey, and we want to just try and change the view on a difficult journey.
Can I just start off by asking you, what does the word himmat mean? Because in itself has got a meaning. And it only clicked to me now, to be honest.
So there's various meanings for himmat. So there's courage, there's strength, and there's also a little bit of hope in there. And that's kind of what we want our guests and our viewers and anyone that joins our sessions to hold on to. The fertility journey can be a very, very difficult journey. And having that reminder of us as Himmat is what we want everyone to remember and to hold on to.
And tell me, you said that it's an organisation that you and your husband have started up, and that's a refreshing thing, because we've come across a number of organisations, and just the fact that you've said my husband is also included in this. Why did you decide to go it together rather than alone, which many organisations do?
I think what we found going through our own fertility journey was a woman's viewpoint was very much spoken about, but there was no Punjabi South Asian male talking about their experience through fertility, and how there's so much stigma around it's always on the woman, that the men is sort of kind of let off a little bit. So we wanted to kind of show that it's not always just the woman. You know, men struggle through the fertility journey. They struggle through miscarriage. They struggle through loss, and they are as much as a part of the fertility journey as the woman. They face kind of issues through the fertility journey, and for that reason, he has always, and I'm so grateful for this, he's very open about his experience through everything that we've been through. So we thought that it was so important to have a male perspective on the whole journey as well.
And on that point, how much have you learned of the male perspective? Because that is one thing, we do become so focused on our own experiences, you don't realise there's another person that is feeling how they are feeling.
100%. I mean, from him, I have learned so much, and I've learned so much about the grief journey, and how it differs from my journey, and how his was almost forgotten about. I felt that when we went through miscarriage, loss, and a difficult fertility journey, everyone was so quick to ask how I was, but there was also him that was feeling a certain way. There was also him that was hurting through miscarriage and through loss, and he was just sort of pushed to the side. So it's been a massive eye-opener, and again, as I say, I'm so grateful for him to open up and be honest about how he's been feeling and what he's gone through on this entire journey.
So why do you think he feels so comfortable? Because quite a lot of guys don't. Why do you think he feels comfortable to come out and explain and talk about his emotions and what he's going through?
It's a good question. He's always been kind of very heart on sleeve person. He's always been very open and honest with people about what he's gone through, his mental health journey. And I think even just for himself, he thought that when we went through loss, there was no other male that he could relate to. And he really wanted to be that change for the South Asian community. We all know that, mental health is still, yes, it's spoken about much more than it once was, but it's still quite a taboo subject. And for that reason, he wanted to be the change that he needed at that time. So he's taken that in his stride, absolutely kind of been honest about everything he's ever felt, how his mental health has been going through miscarriage, through loss, through a difficult fertility journey. And I'm so grateful that he has, he's had so many people reach out and just that are just grateful that he is someone that they can relate to and, know that they've been through the same thing.
Who's, out of interest, who is reaching out? Is it other men that are reaching out that have obviously gone through very similar experiences?
Yeah, so other men, couples are reaching out to us to say, it's nice to see a South Asian couple that are not just one person is opening up, but it's the both of you together talking about how your journey was different, and how you dealt with that together, and how you came together to understand a different perspective and, to kind of learn about each other's journey. Because I do think that during our entire fertility journey, it's been a learning curve, learning how he's feeling about a certain situation and listening to each other, because the male and female perspective is so different, and having that opportunity to listen to each other and understand each other, because we've both been so open and honest about how we feel, has been so important.
What's the one big learning that you've been really surprised at? I know I don't know if I'm going to catch you off guard, but I've given you a few minutes because I'm still talking. That you've learned from him, from the fact that he is open. What surprised you?
Oh, good question.
I gave you a few seconds there. I did.
That's a good question, though. What have I learned from him being so open and honest? I think the main thing is that I've learned that there is nothing to be ashamed of, with a difficult fertility journey, miscarriage, loss. As a female, you put so much pressure on yourself because you believe that that is what your body is meant to do, and when that doesn't happen, there's instantly a sense of shame and a sense of guilt. And him being so open and honest has made me realize that there is nothing to be ashamed of. Miscarriage, loss, fertility is a part of life, and it happens to all of us.
Do you think, not that nothing can make the whole thing of loss easy, but do you think you feel more supported, and because you're going through it together and he's sharing his opinions, do you think it's almost making it easier? I don't even think that's the right word to use, but that you're taking this journey together and you're sharing your experience, rather than what usually happens. Usually the man stands guarded and has to be the strong person.
But again, you've just said strong, and we've had this conversation where it's like, well, actually, I'm going to delve into that. Sorry, I know, Sarina, you're about to answer that.
It's okay.
But that whole thing of strong, and that's the issue. Why are we using language like that? Because he's decided to open up.
That is true.
Sorry, that was us analysing. I told you before that we start analysing things, Sarina. That's me analysing on here.
I think with him showing me it's almost his vulnerable side. It's the side that no one else gets to see, and him opening up to the world about that vulnerable side, that in itself it's been interesting, because I think when you go through grief and you go through loss, and almost as a woman and a man, you kind of grieve different things. So if you are having a difficult fertility journey, or you've been told that you won't be able to have children or anything like that, as a woman you grieve a pregnancy journey. As a man you grieve different aspects of that pregnancy journey. So I think coming together and being open about what we're both grieving for a start, and how we're both feeling about different situations, as I say, it just opens your eyes to a different perspective, and learning about that perspective. I feel like myself and my husband, we're forever learning from each other, because we look at life so differently as well. My husband is and even when we went through our miscarriage, he's one of these people that was straight away very much it's God's will, it's in God's hand. And I was completely the opposite. I'm so honest about saying I was angry at God at the time when it happened. I was like, why us? Why is this happening to us? We're good people. We we do the right thing in my eyes, and why we live our life the right way, and why is this happening to us? But I think even just having that different mindset, it's an eye opener to a different way.
Can I ask you a question earlier on? And then we're going to, I do want to move to obviously what your experience, because we've really delved already into the fact that your husband has joined. There's one thing that you said earlier, and it was the fact that you blamed yourself as a woman. You tend to think, this was my job, da, da, and this is something that you tend to hear quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the fact that he was open with how he was feeling and his perspective, did that reduce that thought or make that thought sort of minimize in your mind then? Did it make you feel not better, but it wasn't a case you realize that it's your fault? Because it's, as we know, it's not your fault.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely reassured that this is not your fault, and it's God's will. And there's one thing that my husband said to me when we went through a miscarriage was, there's something bigger for us. And at the time I was like, I can't see it. We've gone through loss. What could be bigger? And sometimes now I take a step back and I look at how far we've come with Himmat Collective. We're still very new, but the people that we've supported and the people that have reached out to us to appreciate what we are doing has shown me that bigger picture. I know that, yes, we went through loss, but at the end of it, the 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 feeling that you get from helping someone and someone saying to you, you know what, listening to your video really helped me today. It got me through another day. There's no other feeling like it.
That's good to hear. That really, and that does make you think that you are helping people, and there's a reason you're doing that. So that's really good to hear. In regards to your journey, so we keep saying there was problems with fertility. Can you explain what's happened in your life?
Yeah, of course. So we got married in 2017. We decided that we were going to travel for a few years. Lockdown hit, and we were like, right, okay, now's the time. Let's try for a family. No better time than thinking, okay, we've got time on our hands.
You can't get out of the house.
Exactly.
Yeah, there we are.
Literally got time on your hands. So there you go. So we started trying for a family. It took us about 9 months before we first fell pregnant. We fell pregnant in November of 2020. We had a miscarriage in December 2020. So we found out from a scan we should have been 10 weeks, and our baby was only measuring at 8 weeks 5 days, and there was no heartbeat. At the time I was offered medical management or to go home and wait. So I went home, I waited. I actually suffer with low platelets, which means if I bleed heavier. So I was then called into the hospital and told that after 2 weeks they needed to go through medical management. So they kept me in overnight. In total, they gave me 6 pessaries to obviously start the process. I went through the miscarriage, and the next day I was told that I may have to go down for a blood transfusion because I was still bleeding quite heavily. At the time, we were at the peak of COVID, so I was alone. And FaceTime was my honest saving grace, because I think without it, I just probably wouldn't have coped.
Sarina, can I just ask, were you aware of the low platelets prior to getting pregnant? So you were aware of that?
Yeah, so I was aware of having low platelets since 2014. So it's something that I was sort of used to. I was used to kind of the first couple of days of my period being heavier, things like that. I kind of got used to the situation, and that was just how it was. So we knew about that before. So after I had the medical management, luckily, thankfully, I stopped bleeding slowed down, and I was able to come home. 2 weeks later, I still had a positive pregnancy test, so I went back into the hospital, and I had a consultant and I know this is going to be quite graphic. I had a consultant use forceps to pull out the remaining tissue, and there was no regard to how I was feeling. I was telling her, you're hurting me, you need to stop. And it was like, no, it's just a little bit, you'll be fine. So that was sort of my first experience in the hospital. Told to go home, no offer of counselling or anything to help. It was just, yeah, there you go, all done, see you later.
So, sorry, so why was there tissue still remaining?
I don't know. Not everything had passed. So not
Okay.
everything had come away.
Okay.
So that's why I was still having the positive test and still had to go back in.
But I don't think even with miscarriages, it might have been they could have blamed the COVID times and they didn't have enough information. But I've had a miscarriage before as well, and you're just sent home and on your way, here's a couple of leaflets.
Yeah.
It's just not managed right, is it?
No, not at all. It's just not. It's just, there you go, job done, see you later, off you go, next one in. And that was sort of how it felt. I must admit that it was more, I got that feeling more from the doctors than the nurses. My nurses that I had were absolutely incredible. They were very, very supportive. What can we do? Do you need anything? And I feel that at the time you don't know what you need. So you instantly say, I'm fine, I don't need anything. But it's not until you kind of get back home, you start to process that grief that you understand what you need. So that was our first miscarriage. We then got pregnant again in May of 2021. We knew for 2 days before I started miscarrying again. So I started bleeding quite heavily, and that was the point where my husband Vic saw everything start to finish. I was bleeding quite heavily. He took me into A&E, and I remember standing in A&E and I was, really heavily bleeding and saying to the receptionist, I need to see a doctor now. Thankfully, they rushed me through pretty quickly, got me into a bed, and literally we're just sort of, here you go, here's a bed, we'll keep an eye on you because of your low platelets, and we'll just let the miscarriage happen. And I remember, because it was still sort of COVID, I remember leaving Vic in the corridor and the nurses saying, you can't stay. And the look on his face was, he just looked so helpless. And there was nothing that either of us could do for each other at that point. And sort of later on that night, the pain, I remember getting increasingly worse. I remember crying my eyes out to a nurse. They gave me a tramadol injection in my leg. They gave me morphine for the pain. And I was gas and air they gave me, and I was crying my eyes out saying, I just want my husband. Thankfully, because the rules had lifted slightly, she let him stay. So that night, obviously, we went through the bleeding and passing of most of the tissue. The next morning, there was still tissue left over. The doctors asked me if I wanted the forceps again, and I said no. I said I don't want anyone near me with that. And so I opted for the manual vacuum aspiration, which is sort of like the long suction tube where they suck everything out. And I feel like that was, as strange as it sounds, that miscarriage brought me and Vic closer together, because he went through every moment with me. He saw what my body was going through start to finish.
See, that's really interesting, because I've had conversations as to some people that I know don't. So, for example, when someone does give birth, or when someone goes through a miscarriage, or men don't tend to be there. Not all the time. I've heard it in a few cases, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, you did it. I mean, I'm pretty sure you should be there for the result, whatever the result is. And that, I mean, the fact that you've just said it brings you closer, I mean, that should be enough for anyone to think, actually, I need to go through this process with my wife or with my partner.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was the moment he really understood what I was going through. Seeing everything firsthand. I mean, as graphic as it is, he was holding me up when I was like too weak to hold myself up. And he saw everything, and I think him being there and understanding, and just as simple as holding my hand, knowing he was there, it brought us that much closer together. Whereas the first time, because it was COVID and because we weren't together, and I don't think he really understood what I was going through, from obviously because he was at a distance. He couldn't stay. I felt that miscarriage we grieved so differently.
Do you think it helped him accept and almost like the grieving journey that he saw it the second time? It helped him with his journey of grieving?
Yeah, definitely. I think we grieved very similarly the second time. And one of the things that we named both our babies. Baby number one was Baby Dinosaur, because Vic once said, it looks like a dinosaur on the app. Baby two, can do. Baby two
Men.
was Baby Butterfly. And the reason that we called our second Baby Butterfly was they were only with us for a short time, but we were reminded from that pregnancy that through a struggle you have to have patience, and through that struggle comes a transformation. And I felt that coming through that miscarriage together, we transformed as a couple. We came out of that so much stronger than we probably were before that. And so, yeah.
Can I just say our logo is based on a butterfly for the very same reason?
No
It's
way.
it is. That's interesting. That is. So when you've just said that, I'm like, this is the thought that we had. That's really strange.
That was always our that's why we called our baby butterfly. They're only here for a short time, but it reminded us that through kind of through a struggle, a beautiful thing can be born.
And what about the family around you? How did your parents react? How did the wider family react?
So I'm very, very lucky to have such supportive people around us. My in-laws were incredible. My parents also. I think my own parents struggled with it more than just because they didn't know kind of what to say. And because I wasn't with them, again, they saw me from a distance, what I was going through, that they didn't see in my everyday. In fact, with Himmat Collective, it was actually inspired by my mother-in-law. So the first video that we created was inspired by my mother-in-law, because I remember going through the first miscarriage. She sat with me and she told me about her experience through miscarriage, and I just felt so validated. All my feelings were validated in that moment.
When your mother-in-law did explain what she went through, how did she handle it? So you've obviously come up with Himmat Collective and you're doing something so beautiful for people that are going through something very similar. How did she cope with, what was her coping strategy?
So back then she didn't. There was nothing. She brushed it under the rug, as it was for a lot of people, I think. And there was no support. I think back then it was just, okay, it's happened, move on, get on with it. Just in that moment when she sat with me and she knew what I was going through, it inspired us to create a video to open up and let people know that it was okay to talk about.
Did you know about her miscarriage prior to you going through a miscarriage?
No.
Okay. And that's the interesting thing. And that's something we found with our organisation. Unless we openly talk about something, or, when we do, all of a sudden, everyone seems to be like, oh, I've got a story about that. I've got a story about it. And that is why it's so important that we do talk about these taboo subjects, because we don't want to be like our parents and their parents, where they didn't have a coping strategy. Why, unfortunately, there are issues in the previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly why.
100%. I totally agree. I mean, I just think that kind of when she went through hers, there was no space. And even when we first opened up, we did a video on Facebook, and we had family, we had friends reach out to us, say, oh, I went through a similar thing. And some of these people hadn't talked about it for 20, 25 years. And we were like, why have you never told anyone? There was no one to tell.
And your mother-in-law, do you think she was still not got over her grief? Because obviously she brushed it under the carpet, and she didn't, cope with that. Sorry, she didn't go through that grieving journey.
I think the grieving process for the generation kind of before me was very, very much behind closed doors. I think she coped with it, but I feel that grief was held held in kind of a hidden place within her, and it was never shared.
But that's a beautiful connection you've got. I know not, you don't want to have that connection, but as a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law, you've got a connection there, and it's a very deep connection, I would
Yeah.
have thought.
Yeah, 100%. And she knew the moment she said, I know how that feels because this is what I went through, in an instant, I knew that every feeling I had was valid. And that was just enough. Like, that was all I needed. I needed someone to say, I've been through this. I know what you're going through. I felt like this. That was it. Like, it helped so much with the grieving process there and then.
Why do you think we all second guess ourselves? Because you said, oh, when she said, explained her journey, that you felt that
validated,
everything was valid. Why do you think we do question ourselves and think, okay, am I, is this right what I'm feeling?
I think it's just a social expectation, isn't it? That you get married, you have kids, and the journey is straightforward. And I think that comes from even kind of when you're in younger education, and you're taught about these things. You're never taught that the fertility journey can be difficult. You're always taught that's it. It happens once, and you're going to get pregnant. And you grow up believing that is the norm.
That's a really interesting point, actually. I mean, I had a very exact same thoughts. I mean, when I got married and, we were trying, it did take a bit of time. And you are like, oh, what's going on? It's true. You're never told about this.
Yeah.
And others that I've spoken to, friends of mine, have said exactly the same thing. How do you think we can overcome that problem? Because it is an issue. I was worried when I was going through it. I mean, I didn't have to wait too long, but there was a waiting process to the point that I did go to the doctor. By the way, no one actually knows that, which is interesting that we are bringing that up. That's not a conversation that I've had openly.
I think that it's a lack of education. It's the way that education is put towards the younger generation. it's portrayed in such a way that it's almost to instill fear, to say don't have sex, you'll get pregnant, rather than if you have sex you may get pregnant. However, there are a range of issues that you may face during your, when you get to a certain age. There's PCOS, there's endometriosis, there's all of these different things that can affect your fertility. I mean, even now, myself and my husband have gone through testing because we have been trying since January of last year and we haven't felt pregnant. We've now gone privately, had some testing, and we found that there are issues with both myself and my husband. I have a low egg count, he has a low sperm count. So again, society automatically thinks the woman's the problem. But now we found out that there's an issue with both of us. So it's both of us have got to make certain changes, take certain medication, things like that. So it's just a lack of education, I think.
Okay, so on that point, in the fact that you do know that there is, you've got low egg count and he's low sperm count, what is the next part of your journey then?
So we are just about to undergo IVF. We have had so my husband has had medication from the doctors for the last 6 weeks, and hopefully mid-Feb we'll be going through the IVF process.
So you never hear about the man's side of things. I always hear about IVF and what the woman's journey is, but I don't think I've ever heard the other side of things, probably because it isn't discussed again openly and it's hidden.
Can you tell us on that point what the other side is? What actually happens as part of the IVF process for both the men and the women?
Yeah, of course. So for our case in particular, so as I say, for myself, I have a low number of eggs, much lower than it should be. They've also found that my NK cells, so my natural killer cells, are high, which means that when I do get pregnant, my body automatically thinks it's a foreign object and my cells, kill off the baby. For my husband's perspective, so his sperm count for his age should be in the tens of millions. It's in the tens, closer to zero. So obviously in that respect we were offered the option of donor eggs, donor sperm. We both said that we wanted to use our own. We were then offered some additional genetic testing. So one of the other things that the clinic wanted to test for, especially for my husband, was if there was a genetic condition that caused him to have a lower sperm count. Thankfully, they all came back negative. So our doctor is much more optimistic in the sense of, it should work for us.
So the medication that you're on now is to increase your egg count and his sperm count. Is that correct?
No, so I'm not on any medication at the moment. My
Okay.
husband is on a female hormone,
Mhm.
which they are testing to hopefully boost his sperm count. So his process in the IVF will be that after 6 weeks, they will take a sample. They'll test that sample, call him, see if it is any better. After 8 weeks, when he finishes the medication, they'll take a second sample, freeze the one that they think is better, and then on egg collection day, he will do a third sample. So that's kind of his journey in this.
So the medication he's got is, you said it's a female hormone.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit about that?
Yes, so they are testing it at the minute. They have trialed it on a few different cases where it has worked to increase sperm levels.
Okay, that's fine. And how about, okay, so your journey, what are you going through on your side of the journey for
So
this?
for myself, it will be on the first day of my period. I will start to take the medication to sort of break down my immune system, and that'll be a slower process. I'll then take the injections, which will stimulate my ovaries to create hopefully more eggs, and then before egg collection, I go into the hospital. They'll give me an IV drip for 3 hours, which will completely sort of shut down my immune system. They'll do egg collection. They'll obviously do the IVF process, check which of the sperm samples are the best one, and then they'll give me some more medication to start to prep my body for implantation. After 5 days, I'll go back in for transfer, and depending on how many eggs we get that are successful, we'll implant those back, and then it is the dreaded 2-week wait after that.
You've clearly read the instruction manual very well.
I was
And
going to say,
remembering all those figures off the top of your head.
I love the fact that you're so open and confident, even, more than anything else, just to say it as it is. Because we as a community, you kind of shy away and you only tell part of the story, but you've laid your cards out, and there's so many people that are probably going through the same thing you are and thinking, yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm going through that. I'm going through that. But I didn't know anyone else was going through that. And again, this is the whole reason why you started Himmat Collective.
Yeah, the whole point of Himmat Collective is, an open and honest platform. I never want anyone to feel ashamed of their journey, because the fertility journey is not always straightforward. It's not always a straight road. There's twists, there's turns, there's bumps, there's everything. There's a lot of feelings in between that. And I think if I can be open and honest about everything that I'm going through, I want other women to find strength in that, and know that their story it's okay, whatever it is. There's no shame in it.
Can I ask, how are you feeling about, because you're at the start of the IVF journey, how are you feeling about it?
I'm nervous. I'm not going to lie. I'm very, very nervous, and I'm cautious of not getting ahead of myself and taking things day by day. Because I think once you go through kind of loss once, those feelings and that innocent joy is really, really stolen from you. Pregnancy, after loss is really, really hard, and going through the IVF process is a difficult process in itself. So at the moment, both myself and my husband are taking things, day by day. We're talking to each other about how we feel. We go to every single appointment together, whether it's mine or his. So we're there to support each other. And as I say, I'm so grateful that I've got such a supportive husband who, even when I do have a bit of a wobble, will keep me grounded, and remind me that it's all God's will.
Well, I think you've just said something that's like, okay, it's God's will. I can't say and come back on anything now. I will ask another question though.
Of course.
With the fact that obviously the IVF process, it's very common. A lot of people are going through IVF because the rates of having any fertility problem is increasing, especially within the South Asian community. I was researching it myself a little while ago. regardless of the fact that we don't talk about it, but it is increasing.
Yeah.
Does that give you a bit of comfort in the fact that it is a well-tested method of doing it this way? Is that helpful to know, or are you still like, oh, actually,
There's swings and roundabouts, I think. It's a hard one to say I'm comfortable in knowing that it's you read a lot of success stories, but at the same time there's always the unsuccessful stories as well. So I think it's just about, as I say, keeping grounded and just taking each day at a time. It's so, and again, it's so difficult to kind of have such feelings of excitement, because there is a seed in the back of your head of that, what if it doesn't work, and that's just me being realistic. I am optimistic, but I'm also realistic, so I try to flip both sides.
Can I just say, I hate it when everyone says, but I am realistic. This is the conversation me and my husband have. I'm like the optimistic. He's like, no, I'm being realistic. I'm like, I do not want to hear that. So go for the optimistic every time.
Hold both sides of the coin. Just
don't worry about the other side of the coin.
And do you have to change your... I'm being really naive in asking this question, but do you have to change the way you exercise, maybe having more exercise, or your diet, or anything like that, along with the medication that you're taking?
Yeah, I mean, diet was one of the things that we talked about with our doctor, specifically, mainly kind of for my husband more so than me. So my husband is Amadari, so obviously no meat, no fish, no eggs, and the doctors were kind of conscious of pushing through different ways of him getting proteins to boost his sperm levels. But for myself as well, I'm vegetarian, I don't drink milk, so things like that. So we've said to our doctors, this is how we are, and the doctor has, I've got to say, has been great, has always found us an alternative, rather than say, okay, you need to change this about your diet, you need to change that, you need to change that. He's really kind of taken on board what we've said and said, this is our lifestyle, and he's quite happy to find us alternatives rather than say, no, you need to change this or you need to change that.
That's good to hear that the NHS, is this on the NHS or the private? That's the other part.
On privately.
Private, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how I was going to say, it's good to hear that NHS is so considerate, but obviously we won't say that then.
I had a couple of difficulties with the NHS. My doctors wouldn't refer me to a fertility clinic until I'd had 3 miscarriages. Yeah.
Okay. Don't they look at the mental? Obviously, they don't look at the mental health side of things. It's just numbers.
Just numbers, yeah.
Unfortunately, I know I'm being devil's. I was going to say, I know I'm being devil's advocate, but going back to the fact that the rates are very high, and this is completely being devil's advocate on the NHS. I can see why they do need to have a number, because unfortunately we are all just numbers to the NHS, and that's just the way the system is.
I do agree with that. I think in certain kind of situations they can, and if they know if someone's been struggling for a while and they've miscarried and there's various factors that show that there is some sort of difficulty there, they can refer for testing. They can push for more. But you're right, we are just numbers.
So for couples, obviously they've got this stress of the fertility stress, and then on top of they've got the financial stress as well. What are the coping strategies then? Are there coping strategies?
I mean, you're right, totally right. The financial kind of stress of the fertility journey, as well as the mental stress is so high. But I think as long as couples can be honest with each other and be open with each other, understand what each other are going through, and transparency, I think for me is just so key. I think that's the only way you can get through this sort of journey. There's no other way to get through it together.
And again, how are your in-laws and family sound amazing anyway. How are they dealing with the fact that, it is stressful for yourself? They, regardless of what we say, but families do feel sometimes a bit helpless as well.
Yeah.
I would have thought, I don't know, I'm assuming. Have you had any conversations with your family about the whole process?
We've always been very open and honest again with our families of what we're going through, what route we're going to take. They are they they have always said to us that it's our decision, and it's a decision that myself and my husband will sit down and make together. But again, I think with and what's interesting is, so we sat down this weekend just gone with my husband's grandparents, who are obviously not the generation before us, but the generation before that, and we told them everything, from testing to IVF to what's happening, and they were so supportive. So I think as a whole, the family that we've got around us are so supportive. They are just pillars of support, and they might kind of talk about it when they're on their own, but they've never shown us that sign of weakness. They've always been like, whatever you need, we're here. Even just to talk to. And I was really surprised as grandparents who have come over from India, we've sat down and told them everything that we've told you in Punjabi. I was like, oh my gosh, how is this going to go? I'm a granddaughter-in-law. How is this conversation going to play out?
You probably didn't know all of the Punjabi words for some of the stuff that you were talking about, right?
No, I really didn't. Some of it had to be translated into English, and I was like, oh my god, this sounds so odd in half Punjabi, half English, but there
I was
we
going
are.
to say, how do you say, they wouldn't know what IVF was, so would you have explained the process of, not obviously in so much depth, but...
Oh, no, in depth. No, it was definitely in depth. They knew everything.
I love the fact that you're smiling, so it must have been an interesting conversation.
I mean, I'm laughing because in my head, the way that I had envisioned that going was like, they're going to be like, what the hell are these two going on about? But they really...
IVF,
yeah, that was what I expected. But I'm so grateful that they understood. They asked us questions. They were asking us, how long is it going to take? What are the doctors saying the chances are, and things like that. So
can I just say, I mean, that just reminded me of something. I remember my granny, just a random, not to do with fertility, but just the fact that you were talking to your grandparents. So someone at the Godvara gave her headphones, and she was amazed that sound was coming out of the headphones. And I was sitting there thinking, we better not tell her about the fact that they are sending the rockets out of this earth. That would blow her mind. But I'm assuming it's a very similar sort of thought. So yeah, the grandparents are another ball game, aren't they? Really,
100%. So it was a really interesting conversation. But like I say, they've all our family members have been such pillars of support that they've always been like, whatever you need, we're here to talk to you, we're here to support you guys and your decisions and what you guys want to do going forward. So I'm really grateful for that I've had it both sides as well.
You sound like a lucky lady in that respect, because sometimes we do hear the other side of the story, which is always a bit depressing. So all of us had a big smile on our faces when you've been saying that.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got absolutely, touch wood, absolutely fantastic communication with your husband and your in-laws and your family is a real eye-opener as to, look, times can be hard, regardless of whatever the situation is. But as long as you have that support, how much of a difference that makes, especially within the South Asian community. We're very quick in bringing in the negativity. But one thing that we've always said, the absolute positive thing about the South Asian community is the fact that we've got a community and we've got family that is there in most cases to support us. And that's exactly what you've highlighted today, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think certain conversations when we initially kind of brought them up were uncomfortable. But had we not had those uncomfortable conversations about what was going on and what was really happening and how we were struggling and how we were going through loss and what we were going to turn that pain into, we probably wouldn't have the support that we do have now. So it took an uncomfortable conversation, but if it changes the mindset, then that's what we're here to do.
Good. But that's it, isn't it? Keeping it to yourself as well. There's an added pressure as, oh my God, is someone going to find out? But now you've just opened, like, again, we've said it, opened out, and now you've got the support. You've, opened out everything in front of them, and they're supporting you and they're helping you through your journey. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I went to weddings after we released our video, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope no one says to me, when are you going to have kids? And luckily, thankfully, nobody did, because I think I had one person say it, and I was like, I've had 2 miscarriages, and you just see the
Did you
the
say
look.
it?
Yeah, of course,
Love it.
of course.
That's great.
I've gone through 2 losses, and their face just changes, and you're like, probably shouldn't have asked that question.
Hey, we've had this conversation, and I've made that mistake before, and I'm like, oh shit, won't be doing. And I have. I mean, I did it quite. It's one of those things, but it is a learning curve
It's
from
one of
people
those
on the other side. Just to let you know.
No, 100%, it is a learning curve, but that was my point. I was like, I want you to know what I've been through, so next time if you were to ask that question, you maybe just think a little of maybe
That you're
just
going to be sitting here for another half an
yeah,
hour to find
yeah,
out.
but you can ask the question, just word it slightly different,
Yeah.
That's all.
How would you, out of interest, how would you have worded that then? Because that is, we've discussed this previously. Firstly, I've changed my mind. I don't think people should be asking that. That's from my opinion. But
I
if
would
someone
still ask,
does, what would you?
I don't think there's anything wrong with answering the questions, because 9 times out of 10 it comes from such an innocent place, and people do it from a place of love, but if it was me, I'd be like, are you guys thinking of having a family? Is that something that you've thought about? Is everything okay? Simple as that.
I think because we're so automatically into, oh, when are you getting married? And we don't,
When you
it's like a
having kids,
conversation
yeah.
starter. And sometimes you don't know what else to talk about. So you're like, oh, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? And you don't expect the answer that if it's someone that comes and says, oh, it's a miscarriages that you went through. You're like, oh God, a bit stumped. So I think it's like an automatic thing as well that you ask.
100%. We've all done it. I think we've all done it innocently, and not intentionally to kind of hurt anyone. But I think after I myself probably asked that question prior to going through a miscarriage, but having gone through a miscarriage now, and seeing the flip side of that, it's changed my perspective on how to ask people and how to kind of engage in those conversations.
As we come to the end of this podcast, what advice would you give someone that is going through? Well, I mean, you've been quite clear throughout this whole thing, but I do just sum it up for us, Sarina. What are the steps that you'd take, advice to take for someone going through a journey of infertility, fertility, and just what you've gone through?
My advice would be to take each day as it comes. Don't ever think that it's your fault, and be honest with the people that you love, because it will help them understand where you are in your journey and where you're going.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Sarina. I think I said this at the start, even before I recorded. I mean, I learned so much from podcasts like this, and how we should be talking, language, communication. It's key to making sure that we can raise awareness about these subjects. So we really do appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.